Well, hello, dear listeners and dear viewers, and welcome to another episode of the Global Advocate Career Podcast. We're starting off January 2021 with a fantastic guest. He's a dear friend and someone who I want you to know. His name is Euan Cameron, and he's CEO and co-founder of Willo. Euan, welcome.
Thanks, Michelle. It is awesome to be here. Thanks for having us.
Oh my goodness, it's such a pleasure to have you. And where are you, please? Where are you right now?
So I'm based in Scotland, in a city called Glasgow, and it is very cold right now. And it was actually snowing this morning as well. So it's pretty cold. It's 0 degrees outside right now.
Yeah, 0 degrees is cold, but you're inside. So we're glad
Yeah,
that you're nice and toasty. Can I read a little bio about you?
please.
Fantastic. Ewan has over 15 years of experience in digital marketing and product development. He has worked for large UK and US based clients in retail, beauty, automotive, fintech, and FMCG. He has a rounded understanding of how to operate and grow a business. Willo is his fourth startup, previously starting in a website design agency, online car finance brokerage called Car Money, and most recently a boutique digital marketing agency for e-commerce startup called EAC. Ewan founded Willo in 2018, right, with Andrew Wood, and has been focused on growing the business with the vision to connect people with opportunity using technology. Willo closed its seed round in 2020 during COVID-19. Well done. And has since signed up customers from over 120 countries for its video interviewing platform. Fantastic. We got a lot to talk about. Welcome, Ewan, again. Um, Question. Now, while you were growing up in Scotland, did you ever think you'd own your own companies?
No, you know what? I didn't even think about what I was going to do when I was older. I had no idea. When I was growing up, all
Uh-huh.
I could think about was where I wanted to ride my bike, what films I wanted to watch, and really, yeah, just like hanging out with my friends. I didn't really even think beyond that. I didn't have that kind of that outlook on life when I was growing up, which is really quite unusual, I suppose, for someone who's now running a business, or their fourth business, in fact. But yeah, I know I just kind of lived in the moment and enjoyed being a kid and never really thought much beyond that when I was growing up.
So when did you get the bug? When did you say to yourself, you know what, I'm not going to work for anyone else. I'm going to work for myself?
Yeah, you know what? I actually got the bug at the very end of school. So we were sort of 16, 17,
Mm-hmm.
and we had a entrepreneurial program. In the UK, it's called, I think it's Young Enterprise or something, and it's like a program that school kids can basically sign up for, and they get like £100 or $100 to like start up a business.
Right.
And I did that in that final year of school and started up a website like design agency. I had no clients, so my clients were basically my parents' friends, and my
That
parents'
works.
friends were like, they were like, "Hey, we need a website. Your son looks like he's doing that kind of thing." And back in the day, that was like, websites were quite basic and quite easy to do as well. So
Mm-hmm.
I just kind of threw together these websites for people, and it was like things. And there was one guy I remember was like a property developer. There's
Right.
somebody else was a personal trainer. Somebody else like sold like houses in France.
Mm-hmm.
So I did all these little websites, and then when I started getting paid for these websites and actually like having cold hard cash in my hands, that's when I got excited. I suddenly realized that I could do something, and actually get paid for it, and it was really that moment I was like, this is a bit crazy. I can actually do this. I've taught myself. I haven't like needed to do anything really. I haven't
Right.
had to leave my house. I'm just doing it at my desk. And that, I suppose that was the first moment where I was like, this is really cool. I can actually make money by doing things off my own back.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the exciting kind of moment. And I got a couple of awards and things for doing that business with
Oh, really?
the enterprise money, yeah, which was cool.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So you started off like literally a little mom and pop scenario, right? Where you were actually utilizing your parents. And
Yeah.
then you started your first company.
Yeah.
Tell us about your journey from your first prior to starting Willo.
Sure. So that's a good question then. So my first company was actually the enterprise company I just told you about. So I turned that website agency into a fully fledged business and went to university. And in university, obviously you need money, and I didn't have money, so I just continued doing that. And I would study, and then I'd build websites, and I would study and build websites. And I got lots and lots of referrals from the website design agency. So people were like, you want a cheap website? I know this guy, and people just started calling me up. So I would just build websites in my spare time when I wasn't studying or throughout the summer and things, and just invoicing these people and saving up the cash. So it was really good, and that was the reason I continued that on, was really just to help create some extra funds while I was going to university.
Wow.
And that was awesome. And then came to the end of university and graduated. Didn't graduate with a very good degree, but I graduated with a degree, and I was happy with that because I had a lot of fun. I also ran that business at the same time, so it was exactly what I kind of wanted to leave with. So I was happy with that. So then graduated and went into a graduate role, actually. So I was really fortunate. When I graduated, it was 2010. And 2010 was obviously 2 years after the financial crash. So things weren't too great. I didn't really appreciate that when I was in university, because obviously you're isolated from the working world.
Right.
But when I went into the working world, I realized that things weren't as great as they previously were.
Yeah.
So fortunately got a graduate job though, and the graduate job was in marketing as well, so web and marketing. And I went through that career path, a kind of traditional graduate career path, for sort of 5-6 years. And it was really good. I learned a lot in that time. Worked with teams, grew my own team as well. So learned a lot about managing people. It wasn't just suddenly me on my own doing things. I needed to figure out how to work with others and manage people, and hiring and firing and all that kind of stuff that you never really think about until you have to do it, and no one really teaches you how to do that stuff either. So, which is a bit
like
crazy.
Trial and error, right?
Yeah, exactly. And thankfully, I think a lot of the errors were learned quite early, so I could then move on quite quickly and figured a lot of it out quite quickly. So I like reading stuff, so I read a lot and then put it to practice quite quickly, and did that, and then went into this first or second startup, which was the car finance brokerage. And the finance brokerage was it was a bit of a spin-off of the previous company that I was working with as a graduate. And we basically wanted to help people finance their cars without ever leaving their home. So imagine you find a really cool car, you're like, oh, this is the car that I want. The traditional path would be that you'd phone up the dealer would then take you through a bunch of questions, say, Michelle, what's this, what's that, get all your bank details, all that kind of stuff. It's quite a long process, and you're kind of stuck with that process. What we designed was actually an online portal, and you come to the online portal and we find the best deal for you from all of the different finance that's out there. So it was a really cool idea, and the whole sort of vision of the business was to do right by the customer and actually get them the best deal.
Sure.
At the time when we launched the business, there was a lot of really kind of high finance rates, poor deals going on. People were getting ripped off. So there was a real ethical kind of drive behind that business to do right by the customers, and it works. Obviously, when you do things, for the right reasons, that tends to result in good businesses. And we did every single deal to the T. It was all the best deals we could possibly find people. We didn't make a huge amount of money in the early days, but we did make really loyal customers. And actually, a really funny little insight that I often forget, and then when it comes back to my mind, I laugh at. I used to hand write a letter to all of our customers, and which is a bit weird because it's an online finance business. But I literally got a bit of paper out, a letterhead, a bit of paper, and I would sit down and I would get up all their details about their car and things that they'd bought, and I would write them a handwritten letter about how much I appreciated their business and how much the the startup business that we were running appreciated their custom and things, and that they would hopefully tell their friends. And I hope they're enjoying their new Audi or Mercedes. And I did that until it basically got impossible to do, because we had too many customers. But it was a really fun little thing. I literally just sat down for about half a day, which is ridiculous when you think about all the stuff I had to do. But I used to just sit down at a desk and just go through and write all these letters and then post them all. And it did work though, because we got obviously huge amounts of referrals off that. Friends, family, they either told their friends or family, or they came back and financed another car in a year's time.
Right.
So it did work. It wasn't the most conventional way of doing things, but it worked.
It worked.
So that was fun. Did that until it got too big, and then obviously couldn't do that anymore, unfortunately. But yeah, did that, and then kind of did that for about a year and a half, 2 years. That business, it got to a good size. We were doing like financing 1,000 cars a month, which was a good volume. In the UK, that probably doesn't sound like a huge amount in the US, but in the UK, that was a good number of cars at the time. When you look at the number of cars that are sold in total. And then went away and actually started my own marketing agency. So while I was building my career through those other companies, I was learning a lot about marketing and thinking about how you could apply that to other industries. The things that I learned from selling car finance online was quite applicable to other businesses as well. So used all that kind of insight and knowledge that I gathered to actually help other businesses out. And I was quite fortunate. I had quite a few friends that were starting up businesses online, e-commerce businesses. So I had some clients straight away, started helping them build and grow their Shopify sites traditionally. So it was sort of 3 or 4 years ago now, and everyone was like, Shopify, let's start up a store.
Yeah.
We'll sell something.
Yeah.
We'll deliver it direct to the consumer. So started helping them market their websites, and then did that for a bit. Raised a good amount of cash from that business to then set up Willo, and Willo was then born off a lot of the funds that I actually raised from that previous business.
Okay. So before you go into Willo, it seems to me as though you harnessed this desire to streamline a process while still adding a personal touch, right? So you did that with your website development company, right?
Yeah.
Right. As you brought people online, but you still worked with people. Then you moved on to Car Money, and you took a process that actually deals with people, put it online, but you still dealt with people because you wrote and you maintained. So it's interesting how you marry technology with personality. Okay. So now you're with Willo. Now you've created Willo. First of all, before you tell us about Willo, tell us about the name. What made you think of the name?
That's a good question, and I hate when people ask me because it's not a very good story. But I'll tell you the story anyway, since you asked, Michelle. So the company, originally, when I was setting up Willo, I wanted it to be, so obviously the name is the hardest part, right, of the whole company. As anyone that sets up a company will tell you. Everything else seems mediocre compared to
That's very true.
Super stressful part of the process, and it's right at the start. You can't even get started. I couldn't even do anything without the name, so I needed to land on this name. And as you so rightly mentioned a minute ago, it's really what I was trying to do was connect people and technology. When you introduce a bit of technology, you can't lose the personal element.
That's right.
So bringing them together. So I wanted a name that kind of embraced this and showed, bringing people together, creating something. So originally we came up with the name Weave, and weaving is traditionally where you bring materials together and they make something stronger, right?
Or hair,
yeah. Which I learned quite quickly when I was researching the name, that it was going to have a lot of SEO issues. But anyway, rolled with Weave originally. I was like, Weave is a good name. It's bringing people together, connecting them, and when you bring people together, you make a team. A team is a stronger, unit together, right? So it all made a lot of sense. But unfortunately, Weave was already taken in a couple of countries, and there was one big company in France in particular. So we were advised off Weave by some of our advisors quite early on, which was good, because if I had gone down the path of Weave, we would have had to change it much later on. So
Sure.
yeah, we were like, we need to change the name. And me and my co-founder, Andrew, brainstormed for like hours and hours and hours on this whiteboard. We were like, we're not going to leave this room until we have landed on a name. Like,
Wow.
because it was kind of that thing, like I'd already spent about 6 months trying to figure out Weave. So I was like, I can't spend another 6 months finding out the alternative to Weave. So we just sat in this room, had a couple of beers, had a whiteboard, and we just wrote down words. And we wrote down hundreds of words, Michelle, and we ended up with this huge list, but none of them really worked. They were all too long, they were all too short, they were already taken. And then Woody, or Andrew, my co-founder, suggested he had heard this story about a company. I can't remember what it was now, the company was called, but they called their company after the street that their office was on. So that they basically, we were sitting in the office and they were like, what's that street called outside? That's the company name. Super simple, right? So he suggested, he lived on Willow Lane. So he was like, well, I live on Willow Lane, like Willow and Lane. And we were like, okay, well, Willow Lane's quite long. It's not very interesting. Let's take Willow. So we wrote Willow up in the whiteboard. And Willow was a bit too long. It looked a bit weird. But we scrubbed off the W at the end, and we ended up with Willow. Looked it up online. It was available, which is insane. Like, to find any word that's actually available as a domain is crazy.
Seriously.
And it was also available on Twitter as well. So we went with Willow Video. It was kind of like we could get it everywhere, and there wasn't a huge amount of noise around the word either, which was good.
That's fantastic.
So landed on Willow, and we left that evening happy that we had found the name, and we scrubbed all the others off the whiteboard. So Willow was born off the street name of my co-founder.
Okay, so we won't do a GPS and track him down, unless he wants me to. But, so tell us, what is Willow?
So Willow is a virtual interviewing platform, or video interviewing platform. And what it really means is that people, I'll kind of describe how it works. So people, traditionally, like candidates, come on to Willow, and they are asked a series of questions in a virtual interview. And those questions come up on the screen, one by one after the other, and they answer those questions on video. And the person answering the questions goes through them, they record their answer, they click next, they record their next answer, and all their answers are recorded on video. So you might have 6 questions, you end up with 6 answers on video. And those answers are then submitted and they're sent to an employer. So if you're hiring someone, you, instead of asking those questions over the phone, for example, or asking those questions on a Zoom call like we're doing today, you would ask those questions in a Willow interview. And those answers come straight back into the employer. The cool thing about that, when you think about it in the most simple way, the cool thing about it is that you can do lots of those interviews simultaneously at the same time. Like, you know, you and I are speaking right now, we can't speak to anyone else because we're speaking to each other.
Right.
Whereas we can speak to lots of candidates at the same time with Willow. And that's really the very basic premise of how it works. We allow people just to go through and answer questions on video.
So that's fantastic. So I'm a recruiter, I use Willow, right? I can put up 3-4 candidates at the same time, pre-recorded, and go through each of the answers and see who answers it the best?
Absolutely, yeah, exactly. So you can have them all there in front of you exactly at the same time. And that's a really important point that you just mentioned, Michelle. So imagine in a traditional interview process, you would interview someone at 9 a.m., someone at 10 a.m., 11 and 12. By the 12 p.m. interview, you probably are quite tired. You might not be able to remember the 9 a.m. person very well. But hey, you're now at 12 o'clock, it's the middle of the day, and you've interviewed 4 people. With Willow, you can have all 4 up on the computer at the same time. And that's a really powerful thing.
Well, that's fantastic. I'm just looking at my questions because now I have another question, but let's look at some stats when it comes to interviewing, Okay.
Yeah.
Because as a career coach, this is a major part of my client's life, right? Chances are my client is looking for a new job and they will have to interview. The face of interviewing has significantly changed, particularly during this pandemic. Did your concept come about during the pandemic or before?
Before, and
Wow.
it was before, and then it was accelerated by the pandemic, which is, I would love to take some credit for that, but I can't. It was just literally a horrible virus came along and accelerated what we were doing.
Yeah, and it's amazing because how appropriate is your platform now? I mean,
Yeah,
everything is done virtually. I would say pre-pandemic, yeah, I did a lot of my clients online, virtually, but I also met with them. Now, obviously, it's everything is done online. So
sure.
how awesome is that? Here's a stat for you. 33%, according to lever.com, 33% of recruiters know whether they'll hire someone within the first 90 seconds. That's a minute and a half.
Yeah.
Do you think that your tool will help or hurt applicants?
So this is a question that we get asked, and it's we get asked it by both applicants and businesses. Like, how does it improve or change the process? And what I would say is that it improves the process because, well, the first and most important point is it's flexible, and that's the bit that we really get excited about. If you're a candidate and you've been asked to go to a 9 a.m. interview, you have to go to that 9 a.m. interview. You can't do anything else. Like, you're gonna have to clear your diary. You're gonna have to get rid of the kids, and you're gonna have to be available, or you're gonna have to travel to that interview. And that alone puts a huge amount of stress on people, as you'll know. People get nervous about where the office is. Are they going to find it? Where are they going to get
Oh yeah.
parked? All that kind of stuff goes on through your head, and most of it's irrational, but it all races through your head anyway. Whereas with Willo, the candidate experience is improved because they can do it whenever they want. So they literally just open it up on their window on their computer, and they can take that interview whenever they're ready. So you might have, for example, I have my kid, she naps like 2 hours every day at lunchtime. So when my kid's napping at lunchtime, maybe that's the perfect time for me to do my interview.
Right.
I can open up the interview and I can just smash it. I can do a really good interview at lunchtime, which is a huge advantage. So flexibility is probably the biggest kind of improvement for candidates in terms of the Willo process.
I agree 100%. You've used several words actually to describe the Willow process. Get flexible, authenticity, and being inclusive.
Yeah.
For obvious reasons, right? I'm quite interested in the be inclusive
Yeah.
part of it, right? Because you say on your website that it removes bias and increases inclusivity with a structured and consistent process. Do you find that companies have a desire to be more inclusive and diverse, Euan?
Yes, and that is one of the reasons that it's so prominent on our website, because we are actually enabling these forward-thinking businesses to be more diverse, more inclusive, and a lot of them speak to us and they say, we have no real way of figuring out how to be more diverse and more inclusive. Like, we have a traditional process, we've done it forever, we don't have a huge amount of industry knowledge or insight into how to improve it. And Willo is one of those tools that really just it not only opens up. So when we talk about diversity and inclusion, a lot of it is actually the company's traditional processes narrow things down
Right.
so much that you are just immediately discriminating and not being inclusive. So, for example, a company based in Glasgow has always just looked for people in Glasgow, and they've only ever hired people in Glasgow, and therefore they're excluding everyone else around the world or around the country.
Exactly.
Whereas what Willo does is it allows you to actually cast your net much wider. You don't just need to speak to people in Glasgow because they can commute to your office anymore. You can allow anyone anywhere in the world. So, for example, someone in Germany might be perfect for my job in Glasgow. I can now interview him or her in Germany. I don't need to see him. I don't need to be there. He doesn't need to travel. It's the casting of the net and making making your candidate pool much bigger and broader is really important, and that comes from the remote virtual element. When we talk about the diverse element of it, what it really, I guess, pushes to the forefront is that every interview can be the same, so everyone has a level playing field, and that's the bit that really excites me, and that's one of the reasons that Willo was born. To be honest, I was really frustrated with the way that, because I was interviewing a lot, I was really frustrated with the way that even when I did an interview, I was asking different candidates different questions based on, preconceptions and bias. For example, you might see someone super nervous when you're about to interview, so you would change the questions because you don't want to ask them maybe certain types of questions because they look nervous, and then you ask a really confident person different questions, or you ask someone that's experienced, someone that's older, different questions. So you end up with nobody's on a level playing field. They've all had different questions asked, so they all give different answers, and it doesn't really give you any baseline to assess people on. So when you use a tool like Willo, because every question is asked in the same order, every candidate has the opportunity to put themselves forward in the best way possible. So regardless of their stress, their race, their religion, their location, they can all answer the same questions.
That is exactly right. And just to expand on what you said about casting the net, you're right about that. I mean, Willo has, you're dealing with over 120 countries. So if that's not an example of casting your net, I don't know what is. In reference to leveling the playing field, whereas obviously there's perspectives on both sides of the fence. As a career coach, my goal, right, is to get the client to you in the best light. And so that's preparing themselves, right, for being camera ready, right? Yeah. What are some snafus that you've noticed in the interviewing process that, probably compelled you to create this platform? Like, what was one thing about interviewing? You already gave us an insight, right, into what annoyed you, right? Anything else?
Yeah. So I guess it's interesting when I was creating Willo, the other part of it was what I mentioned before around the flexibility, and people would often be late for interviews, which creates a really bad impression. You haven't even started and you're already late, and you're already, and it's not even the fact that you're late. I mean, I could let the late thing go because sometimes they get lost, right? Or there's traffic. People can't always help that. But immediately that person's also stressed out because they're like rushing, and that's not a great start for any conversation. So definitely being on time, being late, they're not great, and Willo thankfully takes a lot of that away. When it comes to like video interviews and things, though, looking at the camera, which I don't do enough, is it's really difficult to look at there. But looking at the camera is super important because that allows you to have that human connection. But what I would say, and we do a lot of candidate quality kind of screening. We speak to candidates and follow up with candidates and ask them, can we watch your videos back with you and ask you how you got on? And a lot of candidates, they'll either not look at the camera at all, like ever, which is quite kind of distracting when you're trying to watch the video back. But then on the flip side, other candidates look at the camera too much. And
and they're not
staring like this.
Yeah, and
your eyes are streaming.
It's like, yes, you're right, and you're so right. You're so right about that. Listen to this. According to classesandcareers.com, the number one snafu in job interviewing is eye contact. Failure to make eye contact, right? Number two, having little or no knowledge of the company you're interviewing with, right?
Yeah.
And number three, bad posture. Very interesting. So, these are all areas, we're all work in progress, right? So you can totally work on your technique And I think your platform compels us to do that. How exciting about Willo? How do you feel about the role of technology in general? I mean, you've used it throughout your entire career.
Sure.
Do you see technology like artificial intelligence taking over? You know, what are your thoughts on AI?
So that's an interesting one. I actually watched a really good video last night from Simon Sinek, who I'm a big fan
Oh,
of.
yeah. Mhm.
And it was a video, he was talking about technology and kids. It kind of relates to my answer. So his concern was that we're giving kids technology too early, and they're becoming so used to having everything on demand or everything on hand that they end up with a skewed sort of view of life, because the phone is always there. The phone gives them access to information. It gives them access to shopping. They can do everything like this. And what his point was is that that can be quite harmful, because it creates a false sense of kind of convenience and security. So I kind of, to answer your question, I think there's a balance to be had between technology and, I guess, real life people, really. And it goes back to what you mentioned earlier. You know, I think there's a real fusion to be had. Technology should enable people to do things better, live better lives, live happier lives. But at the same time, it needs to be consumed and used in balance. And I think AI is one area which really I am proactively trying to not go down the route of that with Willo, for example, because I feel that AI is one step too far. For certain things, you know, there's certain really menial tasks where you could introduce AI. You know, when someone's copying and pasting something over and over and over again, you could maybe automate that and automate that kind of stuff out. But when it comes to things like, you know, for example, hiring someone, I strongly believe that AI doesn't have a role in hiring someone. It almost seems a bit crazy to me that large organizations do rely on AI to hire people. You know, your people are your best asset, right? Why would you allow a computer to decide on who your best assets are? I'm sure there's other areas which would be better for AI, but I don't think choosing people to work with you or your teams is the right thing to do. So I'm very much against AI in choosing people and choosing talent. And that's really the exciting part about, you know, Willo, and just the fact that the world has really changed over the past 12 months as well to use video conferencing and things. I think, you know, we're using technology to enable that human connection, which is really cool. You know, we're speaking today.
Yeah, you're in
You know, other
Scotland,
sides
I'm
of
in Connecticut.
yeah,
So
yeah, which would never not be possible without technology. But the cool thing about what we're doing is not really the fact that we can speak to each other, but it's what we're saying to each other that's awesome. So I think there's a real balance to be had. That's really my take on it. I think it's something to be mindful of, and we need to be careful of as we move forward. That technology doesn't just remove everything that everyone does, and remove that human connection that we really need.
I agree 100%. You know, and in talking about balance, how do you deal with technology all the time, right? We're all doing it, using it more and more each day. How do you
Sure.
balance your life so that you're
Yeah.
not always in front of the screen?
Yeah. So that's a really difficult one. And you know what? It's difficult because when you're starting a business like I am, you feel like you have to be on all the time.
Yeah.
And being on all the time, being online all the time is actually really harmful. It stops a lot of the creativity. And it makes you feel more tired as well.
It
So
does. It does, you, and it does.
like
Yeah.
mentally tired, not like physically tired because you're not doing anything,
No.
but just like mentally tired, which is not great. So I do switch off. Thankfully, my home office is actually in my daughter's bedroom.
Oh.
So she literally sleeps over there. So when she wants to go to bed, my work is done. So I have to leave the room. So it acts a bit like a a kind of end to the day, which I can't really stretch. I can't like be sitting here typing away while she's trying to sleep.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, that's actually a great technique.
Well,
I think it's
I
great.
don't know. I wouldn't advise like
Yeah. hey, have a child so that you
have a child, put your office in their bedroom. That would give you the perfect work-life balance. No, but seriously, it is a good stop to the end of the day, and I think putting things like phones down as well. I have like a thing on the iPhone, you can like have do not disturb automatically after a certain amount of time. So I think it comes on at like 7 p.m. And it's really good because it just closes all my apps off on my phone. So that kind of stuff's really important because it allows your brain to like, you know, be creative and have a bit of breathing space as well.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it's great that you're making an effort to have some balance. I myself have, you know, really started painting more, you know, I created holiday wreaths. And, you know, it's just so soothing. And so I agree, doing activity offline is really important. What can we expect from Willo in 2021?
Good question. So what's coming up from Willo in 2021? Probably biggest thing that we're trying to do at the moment is make the process more streamlined. So candidates come on to Willo, they apply, and then the process kind of goes offline again. What we're trying to do in 2021 is actually take the process to the next step. So you get the job, for example. So you apply on Willo, you get the job. We're then trying to create a virtual onboarding process to take you to the next step. Because what we're finding, Michelle, is that a lot of our employers are now actually hiring people through Willo and never meeting them, and they're just starting their job. So that's a really interesting, you know, shift that you wouldn't have seen even, you know, 12, 18 months ago. Is there's a virtual interview process, and then there's a virtual onboarding process. So what we're quite excited about is actually developing that onboarding piece out, so we can move candidates through from Willo to the onboarding elements of a company, so they have the best way to, you know, the best start in that career is the plan. So that's exciting. There's lots of other things in the roadmap, but in terms of the kind of the bigger vision stuff, it's really allowing people to virtually apply for jobs and onboard themselves to the job.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. So that means you'll be really busy in 2021.
Yeah, we will.
But it's part and parcel, right, of owning a company. And for what suggestion would you have for someone who's now confronted with having to record? It's happening more and more, and it's not going to go away. What suggestions would you have for someone who's like, for the interview process, they have to self-record and use a platform like Willo? We hope that they'll use Willo, right? But if they're using another platform, what suggestions do you have?
So I have three suggestions that everyone should follow. The first one is to make sure that you have the right environment. There's no point even clicking on that link to start the interview if you're not in the right place. And I don't just mean like the right physical environment, I also mean like the right like mental environment. You know, so there's not a huge amount of value in, you know, 10 p.m. at night setting up your interview and trying to start them, because you're tired, you're not going to be your best self. So being in the right place, both physically and mentally, is number one for me. And when I say physically, I mean things like make sure that you have like, you know, things are tidied up around you. You haven't got like an unmade bed behind you, some like old socks on the floor. And I do see all that kind of stuff all the time. So I'm speaking from experience here that you should remove those things from your background. So right space is number one. The next one is technology. So make sure that your technology is working. So that is typically things like your internet connection. So have a good stable internet connection. And if you don't have a good internet connection, can you use like a hotel Wi-Fi or your friend's Wi-Fi?
Somebody's Wi-Fi, but
someone else.
Someone else, yeah.
And make sure you check it works. Make sure it's solid. And then when you've got the internet working, make sure your camera and microphone work. I see too many people that don't have a microphone that works. And also the front-facing camera on your phone. If you smash the screen, the camera tends to have a crack through it as well. So you don't want that.
So, good intel. Yeah, you don't want that. No.
You don't want a line through your face.
No.
So technology is important. Make sure you test it all before you try the interview out. That'll remove a lot of the stress as well, because it means you can go into the interview confident. And then the final one is to actually practice. So once you've got the right place, got the right tech, practice what you're going to say, because you'll come across better. You'll come across more confident. And I'm sure you can help a lot of your candidates out with that as well. It's really thinking about how you're going to present yourself, what you're going to say.
Listen
So
to you,
that's
and
my three.
I say it all the time. So it's great to hear it from you on the other side of the world, so that folks understand how important it is, right? I cannot,
Absolutely.
I mean, you're so right, right environment. If you got that sandwich and that intimate underwear behind you, yeah, that's not gonna look right. Your tech, you know, can you hear me? Can you hear me? It's like you could test your system out to see if the person can indeed hear you, and
Exactly.
practice. I cannot emphasize it enough. Practice.
Yeah.
Right, you and we took a few takes before I pressed record, so we're doing it. Everyone else should. Euan, it's been such a pleasure in chatting with you, getting to know you, seeing your folks walk by on your street, you know, huddled, because it does look cold over there. It
It
does.
is cold, yeah.
Yeah. Have you gone outside today?
No, haven't been outside today or yesterday.
Oh, that's another thing too, right? When we're at our desk, we need you got to pull yourself away and go outside, get that fresh air, right?
Yeah, go for a walk around the block. It's a good idea. I might do that after this.
Okay, yeah, go for a walk, send me a picture.
Yeah.
But Euan, it was such a pleasure interviewing you. Will you come back and tell us how Willo is going? We'll keep track of you.
I'd love to, yeah. Thank you so much for having us today. It's been really nice to chat, and hopefully added some insight as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Don't hang up. Thank you, dear viewers, and thank you, dear listeners. Until next time.